I knew that necklace the way you know your own handwriting. The thin gold chain with the small amber pendant shaped like a teardrop. I'd watched Lorraine clasp it around her neck 1,000 times. At brunch, at church, standing in front of my hallway mirror, tilting her chin and laughing at something only she found funny. I knew the way the clasp stuck a little on the left side, how she'd twist it with her thumbnail until it caught. I knew the tiny scratch near the bail where she dropped it on the bathroom tile at my house during a dinner party 3 years ago. So when I pulled back the fitted sheet on a Tuesday morning to remake the bed, and that necklace slid out from between the mattress and the headboard like a secret that had been holding its breath, I didn't need to inspect it. I didn't need to hold it up to the light. My hands knew before my mind did. My fingers closed around it, and the metal was cold, and the room tilted just slightly, the way the world shifts when something cracks beneath you that you always believed was solid ground. I stood there for what must have been 3 full minutes, holding that necklace in my fist, staring at the bed I shared with my husband. And the only thought I could form, the only sentence my brain allowed through was this: she told me he would never cheat. Because that's exactly what Lorraine had said. 5 months earlier, sitting across from me at her kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea between her hands, she'd looked me in the eye and said, "Girl, Marcus adores you. That man would never cheat." I had believed her. I had believed her because she was the person I trusted most in this world after him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back. Let me tell you who we were, all 3 of us, before that necklace rewrote everything. Marcus and I met in 2011 at a community job fair in Decatur. He was volunteering at the registration table, handing out lanyards and name badges with this calm, deliberate energy, like he had nowhere else to be and nothing more important to do than make sure your name was spelled right. I remember watching him lean forward to hear a woman with a soft voice really lean in, and I thought, that's a man who listens. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. Nothing extravagant. He cooked dinner at his apartment, overcooked the salmon, burned the garlic bread, and got down on one knee in the kitchen with smoke still curling near the ceiling. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We married in the spring of 2014. Small ceremony. His mother, my mother, a handful of cousins, and Lorraine standing right beside me, holding my bouquet while I said my vows. Lorraine Mitchell, my best friend since the 9th grade at Cedar Hill High. We had been inseparable for over 20 years by the time I found that necklace. She was the person I called when I got the job at the hospital. She was the person I called when my mother had her first stroke. She was the person I called when Marcus and I had our worst fight, the one about whether to keep trying for children after the second miscarriage, and I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot and cried so hard I couldn't see the steering wheel. Lorraine came and drove me home that night. She didn't say anything wise or poetic. She just drove, and when we pulled into my driveway, she squeezed my hand and said, "You don't have to decide anything tonight." That was Lorraine. She didn't fill silence with noise. She sat in it with you, and I loved her for it. She'd been divorced since 2017. Her ex-husband, Terrence, had moved to Houston with a woman he met online, and Lorraine handled it the way she handled everything, with a stiff back and a quiet mouth. She didn't fall apart publicly. She didn't post anything bitter on social media. She just showed up at my house one Saturday morning with a box of his things she didn't want anymore and asked if Marcus could drop them at Goodwill. After that she came around more often. Sunday dinners, movie nights. She and Marcus got along easily, they always had. He'd tease her about her terrible taste in reality TV. She'd tease him about his obsession with keeping the lawn perfectly edged. It was comfortable, warm, the kind of friendship between your husband and your best friend that makes you feel lucky, like your life fits together the way it's supposed to. Our house was a 3-bedroom brick ranch on Collier Road, with a small front porch where Marcus kept 2 rocking chairs and a clay pot of rosemary he watered every morning. Inside, I kept things simple: warm lighting, soft throws on the couch, a kitchen that always smelled like something slow-cooked or freshly baked. I liked my home to feel like an exhale, a place where people could lower their shoulders. And for nearly 9 years of marriage, that's what it was. Marcus worked as a logistics manager for a distribution company. I worked as a billing specialist at a medical office downtown. We had our rhythms. He made coffee at 5:45 every morning, strong, black, 2 sugars. I made dinner most nights unless I was too tired, and then he'd order Thai food from the place on Lawrenceville Highway and set the table like it was a proper meal anyway. We weren't the couple that danced in the kitchen, but we were the couple that sat on the porch after dinner in comfortable silence and watched the sky go dark without needing to say a word. I thought that was love. I still think it was, at least for a while. But love, I've learned, is not a house you build once. It's a fire, and if someone stops feeding it, someone else might step in with kindling of their own. The first thing I noticed wasn't something dramatic. It wasn't a lipstick stain or a strange perfume or a late-night phone call. It was quieter than that, so quiet I almost missed it entirely. It was a Wednesday evening in late September, about 5 months before I found the necklace. I came home from work with a dull headache and a bag of groceries. Marcus was already home, which was unusual. He normally didn't get in until after 6, and it was barely 5:15. His truck was in the driveway, parked at an angle like he'd pulled in quickly. When I walked through the front door, the house smelled like nothing. No coffee reheating, no television murmuring from the living room, just stillness. I found him in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, his phone face down on the nightstand. He looked up when I came in, and for just a second, half a second really, something crossed his face. Not guilt exactly, more like he'd been caught in the middle of a thought he wasn't ready to share. "You're home early," I said. "Slow day," he smiled, but the smile arrived a beat too late, like he'd had to reach for it. I set the groceries down and started changing out of my work clothes. He picked up his phone, slipped it into his pocket, and went to help unpack the bags. And that was it. Nothing happened, nothing was said, but something in the texture of that moment felt different, like touching a familiar fabric and realizing the thread count has changed. I told myself I was being ridiculous, headache, long day, overthinking. But the small things kept collecting. Marcus started showering the moment he came home from work. Not every day, but more often than before. He'd walk through the door, kiss my forehead, and head straight to the bathroom. I'd hear the water running for 15-20 minutes. He used to sit on the couch first, kick his shoes off, ask me about my day while I stirred whatever was on the stove. Now the asking came later, after the shower, after the change of clothes, after whatever invisible reset he seemed to need. Then there were the errands. Saturday mornings had always been ours. Farmer's market, hardware store, maybe a drive to get breakfast at the little cafe near the park. But starting around October, Marcus began disappearing on Saturday mornings for an hour or two, running to the store, dropping off something at the office, grabbing an oil change. Simple explanations, ordinary words. But strung together, week after week, they started to form a pattern, and patterns, I've learned, are the language that secrets speak when they think no one is listening. One Saturday, I asked him where he'd been. He was standing in the kitchen pouring a glass of water, and he didn't look up. "Just had to grab a few things," he said. "From where?" He paused, the glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "Home Depot, needed cork for the bathroom." I looked at his hands, they were clean, no bag, no cork, and the bathroom hadn't been touched. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and went back to folding laundry. But something inside me, something deep and quiet and ancient, the way women carry knowing in their bones, that something shifted, like a door that had been locked for years suddenly loosened on its hinges. And then there was Lorraine. Lorraine, who had always been available. Lorraine, who would answer my calls on the first ring and text me back within minutes. Lorraine, who had a standing invitation to Sunday dinner and rarely missed one. She started pulling back, not dramatically, not in any way I could point to and say there, "That's the proof," but the texts got shorter, the calls got less frequent. Sunday dinners became every other week, then once a month, then something she'd confirm and cancel at the last minute. "Sorry girl, I'm just so tired. Work has been insane. Rain check, I promise I'll make it next week." I believed her, every time, because she was Lorraine, because our friendship had survived 20 years, 2 divorces between us, grief, loss, and distance, and I simply could not imagine a version of reality where she would pull away without a real reason. But one night in November, something happened that I couldn't dismiss. Marcus and I were watching television in the living room. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. He reached for it casually, glanced at the screen, and then, and this is the part I keep replaying, he tilted the phone slightly away from me. Just a few degrees, not enough to be obvious, but enough. He typed something quickly, then set the phone back down, screen facing the cushion. "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the television. "Derek," he said, "asking about the game this weekend." I nodded. Derek was his co-worker. They watched football together sometimes. It was a perfectly reasonable answer. but I noticed he didn't pick the phone up again for the rest of the night. He left it face down on the couch like it was something he needed to keep still, something he needed to keep quiet. That night, after Marcus fell asleep, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan going in slow circles. The blades cut through the dark like the hands of a clock that had lost its purpose. I listened to his breathing, deep and even, the way it always was, and I thought about how strange it is to lie next to someone you've loved for nearly a decade and suddenly feel like you're lying next to a locked room. I didn't check his phone, I want you to know that. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid of what I'd find. And I wasn't ready yet. Not ready to know. Not ready to break the version of my life that I had spent years carefully, lovingly building. So I closed my eyes. And I told myself what we always tell ourselves when the truth is standing at the door and we're not dressed for company. You're imagining things, go to sleep. But the truth doesn't wait for you to be ready. It never does. December came in cold and grey, the way it does in Georgia when the sky can't decide between rain and nothing. The holidays were approaching, and I threw myself into them the way I always did, stringing lights along the front porch, setting out the ceramic nativity set my mother had given me before she passed, baking sweet potato pies, and wrapping gifts in the spare bedroom with the door closed so Marcus wouldn't peek. I wanted things to feel normal. I needed them to, because normal meant safe, and safe meant I could keep pretending the cracks I'd been noticing were just shadows. Lorraine came to our Christmas Eve gathering. She arrived late, almost an hour after everyone else, wearing a green wrap dress and heels I'd never seen before. Her hair was freshly done. Her lips were painted a deep wine color. She looked beautiful, and I told her so. "Girl, stop," she said, waving her hand and laughing, but the laugh didn't quite reach her eyes. She hugged me at the door, and I held on a second longer than usual. She smelled like vanilla and something else, something warm and woody that I couldn't place. It wasn't her usual scent, but I let it go. People change perfumes, it doesn't mean anything. Inside she was pleasant, polite. She complimented the food, talked to Marcus's cousin about her new job, helped me clear plates from the dining table. But she was careful. That's the word I keep coming back to. She was careful in a way she had never been in my home before. She moved through my house like someone walking through a room full of glass, watching where she stepped. And Marcus was careful too. They didn't avoid each other, that would have been too obvious, but they orbited around each other at a very specific distance, like two magnets held just far enough apart to keep from snapping together. He didn't tease her the way he usually did. She didn't playfully swat his arm or call him by the nickname she'd given him years ago, Mr. Perfect Lawn. They were polite, cordial, and something about that politeness made my stomach tighten. At one point during the evening, I walked into the kitchen to refill the punch bowl, and I found them standing near the sink. They weren't touching, they weren't whispering, but the silence between them had a weight to it, the kind of silence that exists between two people who have already said too much in private. Lorraine looked up and smiled. Marcus reached for a dish towel, and the moment dissolved like sugar in hot water. But I felt it. I stood in my own kitchen and felt something I had never felt before in my marriage. I felt like a stranger in my own story. Christmas passed, New Year's came and went. January settled in like a guest who wouldn't leave, long, cold, heavy. Marcus and I moved through our routines. Coffee at 5:45, dinner at 7, porch sitting on weekends when the weather allowed. Everything looked the same from the outside, but inside our house, inside our silences, inside the spaces between his words, something had shifted. The air was thinner, the pauses were longer. And I noticed that Marcus had started sleeping closer to the edge of the bed, his back turned just slightly, like even in sleep he was angling himself away from me. February arrived, and with it, the morning that broke everything open. It was a Tuesday. Marcus had left for work earlier than usual. I remember hearing the front door close at 5:20 before the coffee had even finished brewing. I lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to the quiet, and then I got up to strip the sheets. I'd been meaning to wash them for days, and something about the grey morning light made me want clean linen. Fresh starts, something new against my skin. I pulled back the comforter, tugged the fitted sheet from the corners, and as I lifted the edge near the headboard, the side where Marcus slept, something small and gold slid out and landed softly on the carpet. I bent down and picked it up, and the world stopped. It was a thin gold chain, a small amber pendant shaped like a teardrop, a tiny scratch near the bail. Lorraine's necklace. I stood there holding it in my open palm, and I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. My vision narrowed, like the room was closing in from the edges. The morning light through the blinds fell across the bed in pale stripes, and I remember thinking how strange it was that the sun could still come up on a day like this. How the world could keep turning when mine had just cracked down the center. I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything. I didn't collapse onto the floor like they do in the movies. I just stood there very still, holding that necklace, and I felt something inside me go quiet. Not calm, quiet. The way a house goes quiet right before a storm tears the roof off. My mind tried to offer explanations. Maybe she left it here during the Christmas party. Maybe it fell off her neck when she was helping in the kitchen. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent reason why my best friend's necklace was buried between my husband's side of the mattress and the headboard of our bed. But my body knew. My body had known for months, the showers, the errands, the tilted phone, the careful distance at Christmas, the way Lorraine had stopped looking me in the eye when she hugged me. I closed my fist around the necklace, the clasp dug into my palm, and I made a decision in that moment, not out of rage, not out of despair, but out of something colder and steadier than either. I was going to find out the truth, all of it, and I was not going to warn either of them that I was looking. I put the necklace in the zippered pocket of my purse. I finished making the bed with clean sheets. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and I got dressed for work slowly, deliberately, like a woman putting on armor one piece at a time. Because that's what I was doing, preparing for war, a quiet war, the kind fought not with shouting and slamming doors but with patience and silence and open eyes. I didn't confront Marcus that night, or the next night, or the one after that. I know that might be hard to understand. Most people hear a story like this and they think, why didn't you say something right away? Why didn't you throw that necklace in his face and demand answers? And I'll tell you why. Because confrontation without evidence is just emotion. And emotion without proof gives a liar room to maneuver. I had watched enough people in my life blow up at the wrong moment, say the right thing at the wrong time, and end up looking like the crazy one while the guilty party walked away clean. I wasn't going to give Marcus that luxury, and I certainly wasn't going to give it to Lorraine. So I watched, quietly, the way you watch a pot of water when you know it's going to boil but you need to see exactly when the first bubble breaks the surface. The first thing I did was pay attention to his phone. Not by going through it, I still didn't touch it, but by watching how he handled it. And once you start watching for the patterns, they reveal themselves like ink under blacklight. He kept it on silent now. Always. I hadn't noticed before because the shift had been gradual, the way someone dims a light so slowly you don't realize you're sitting in the dark until you can't see your own hands. But now I saw it clearly. No buzzing on the nightstand, no ringtone from his jacket pocket, just the occasional glow of the screen when he thought I wasn't looking and the quick swipe of his thumb to make it go dark again. He also started taking calls in the garage. He'd step out through the side door, the one that led to the carport, and I'd hear the low murmur of his voice through the wall. Never loud enough to make out words, just a hum, steady, intimate, like a conversation that had been going on for a long time and had found its own rhythm. One evening I stood in the hallway near the door and listened. I couldn't hear full sentences, but I caught fragments, pieces that floated through the drywall like smoke. "You can't right now. Yes, I know. Just give me a little more time." His voice was soft, tender, the kind of voice he used to use with me when we were first together and everything between us still felt fragile and precious. Hearing him speak that way, to someone else, behind a closed door in our home, felt like swallowing broken glass. I went back to the kitchen. I washed the dishes. I dried every plate with the same towel until my hands ached, and I kept my face still. Because the moment I let it crack, the moment I let the pain show, he would know I was onto him, and I needed more time. The second thing I did was reach out to Lorraine. Not to accuse her, to test her. I texted her on a Thursday afternoon, casual and light. "Hey girl, I found a necklace in the house. Gold chain, amber pendant. You think you might have dropped it at Christmas?" I watched the message go from delivered to read, then I watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again, disappear. 4 minutes passed before she responded. I don't think so. I've been looking for mine though, might have lost it at the gym. You know how I am, lol." I stared at that message for a long time, read it 3 times, 4, and each time the lie became clearer, not because of what she said but because of what she didn't say. She didn't ask me to describe it. She didn't ask for a photo. She didn't say, "Oh, let me check if mine is still in my jewelry box." She just deflected, casually, quickly, like someone who had already rehearsed this exact scenario in her mind and was ready with her lines. At the gym, Lorraine didn't even go to the gym. She told me 2 months ago that she'd cancelled her membership because she never used it. I typed back, "Okay, no worries, just checking, love you." She replied with a heart emoji, red, the same color as the lie she just told me. The third thing I did, and this is the one that cost me the most, was check the credit card statements. Marcus and I had a shared account for household expenses and separate personal accounts. I'd never looked at his personal statements before, never felt the need. But that week, while he was at work, I sat at the desk in the spare bedroom and logged into the bank portal using the password he kept written on a sticky note inside his toolbox. He told me where it was years ago, in case of emergencies. I suppose he never imagined this would be the emergency. The charges told a story of their own. A restaurant on Peachtree Road, a place I'd never heard of, with prefixed dinner charges of over $160, twice in November, once in December, once in January. A boutique hotel near Buckhead, a single night stay, December 28th, 3 days after our Christmas Eve gathering. A jewelry store, a charge for $212. October 14th, I thought about Lorraine arriving at Christmas in earrings I didn't recognize, heels I'd never seen, perfume that wasn't hers. I printed every page. I folded them carefully, precisely, the way you fold a letter you know will change someone's life. And I placed them inside a manila envelope, tucked beneath the lining paper in my nightstand drawer. I wasn't gathering evidence for a courtroom. I was gathering it for myself, because I needed to know, not suspect, not wonder, not lie awake with maybes. I needed to know that the two people I had loved and trusted most in this world had been meeting in hotel rooms and sitting across candlelit tables while I was at home, washing their dinner plates and folding their excuses into neat little squares. And now I knew. What I did next I did not do in anger, I did it in clarity. There's a difference. Anger burns fast and leaves you empty. Clarity burns slow and leaves you standing. I stood. I waited until a Sunday. That was deliberate. Sunday had always been our day, mine and Marcus's, and for years it had been Lorraine's day too. Sunday dinner at our house, the three of us around the dining table I'd inherited from my grandmother, roast chicken or smothered pork chops, collard greens, cornbread made from scratch in a cast iron skillet, laughter and leftovers and the easy warmth of people who belonged to each other. I wanted the truth to come out in the same room where the lies had been served. I called Lorraine on Wednesday and invited her to dinner that Sunday. She hesitated, I could hear the pause, the slight intake of breath, but I kept my voice light, easy, the way a woman sounds when she suspects nothing. "It's been too long, Lorraine, I miss you. I'm making your favorite, the brown sugar pork chops." She said yes, of course she did. Saying no would have raised questions she couldn't afford. On Sunday morning I woke early. Marcus was still asleep, his back turned toward me, the comforter pulled up to his shoulder. I stood in the doorway and watched him breathe for a moment. I studied the curve of his spine, the way his hand curled loosely on the pillow. I had loved this man. Deeply. The kind of love that doesn't announce itself but settles into your bones like warmth from a fire you've been sitting beside for years. And I let myself feel that one last time, the love, the fullness of it before I put it down. Because you can't carry love and truth at the same time when they're pulling in opposite directions. Something has to give, and I chose truth. I cooked all day. I set the table with the good plates, the white ones with the thin gold rim. I lit the candle in the center of the table, the one that smelled like fig and cedar. I placed the manila envelope beneath my placemat, flat and invisible. And inside my purse, hanging on the hook by the front door, Lorraine's necklace sat waiting in the zippered pocket like a witness ready to testify. Lorraine arrived at 6. She brought wine, a bottle of red, something expensive, the kind you bring when you're trying to compensate for something you can't name. She hugged me at the door and I hugged her back, and for a moment I felt her stiffen, just barely, the way a person does when they're embracing someone they've wronged and their body remembers even if their mouth won't confess. "Smells amazing in here," she said, stepping inside. "It should," I said. "I've been cooking since morning." Marcus came out of the bedroom, freshly showered of course, and greeted her with a nod. Not a hug, not the easy teasing I remembered from before, just a nod and a careful smile and a "Hey, Lorraine." She said, "Hey, Marcus." And I watched them not look at each other for a beat too long. We sat, we ate. I served the pork chops, the greens, the cornbread. I poured the wine Lorraine had brought and I raised my glass and said, "To old friendships." They both drank. Neither of them noticed my glass barely touched my lips. I let the meal breathe. I asked Lorraine about work. I asked Marcus about the project his team had been finishing. I let the conversation move the way it always had, easy, familiar, warm, because I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to believe that this was just another Sunday. Just another dinner. Just another evening in the house where nothing bad could happen because we were family. And then, when the plates were nearly empty, and the candle had burned down to a low, flickering glow, I reached beneath my placemat and pulled out the manila envelope. I set it on the table, between the bread basket and the butter dish, and I didn't say a word. Marcus looked at it, Lorraine looked at it, and then they looked at each other, and in that single glance, in that fraction of a second where their eyes met and something silent passed between them, I had my final confirmation. The kind no bank statement or hotel receipt could ever give, the kind that lives in the space between two people who share a secret and suddenly realize the walls have ears. "What's that?" Marcus said. His voice was steady but his jaw tightened. I opened the envelope slowly. I laid each page on the table, one by one, like cards in a game I had already won. Peachtree Road Restaurant, November 12th, November 29th, December 15th, January 8th. I read the dates without emotion, without heat, just facts. A hotel in Buckhead, December 28th, one night, I paused. A jewelry store, October 14th, $212. The room went so quiet I could hear the candle flame hiss. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Naomi, I can explain." "Don't," the word came out calm and final, like a door being pulled shut. "Don't explain, don't minimize, don't tell me what I'm looking at isn't what I know it is." I turned to Lorraine. She was sitting perfectly still, her fork resting on the edge of her plate, her eyes glassy. The wine in her glass trembled. I reached into the pocket of the cardigan I was wearing. I'd transferred the necklace earlier, and I set it on the table in front of her. The gold chain coiled softly against the white tablecloth. The amber pendant caught the candlelight and glowed like a small, trapped flame. "I found this in my bed," I said, "between the mattress and the headboard on his side." Lorraine's lips parted. A single tear slid down her left cheek, cutting a line through her makeup. 22 years, I said. My voice didn't break, I wouldn't let it. 22 years I've loved you like a sister. I held your hand when Terence left. I sat with you through the worst night of your life. And this, I gestured at the necklace, at the papers, at the space between them that was no longer invisible. "This is what I get." She whispered, "Naomi, I'm so sorry. Sorry that it happened, or sorry that I found out." She couldn't answer, and her silence told me everything her words never would. Marcus sat with his hands flat on the table, like a man bracing against something he couldn't stop. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said quietly. Nothing just happens, Marcus. You drove to a hotel. You made a reservation. You paid with a credit card. Every single step was a choice. Don't sit in my house at my grandmother's table and tell me it just happened." He dropped his head, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw Marcus cry. Not the way men cry in front of you when they want your sympathy, but the way they cry when they know they've lost something they can never get back. I stood up from the table. I picked up my plate, carried it to the kitchen and set it in the sink. I turned on the water. I rinsed it clean. Behind me, I heard Lorraine push back her chair. I heard the click of her heels on the hardwood. I heard the front door open and close, softly, like an apology that didn't have the courage to be spoken aloud. She left her necklace on the table. She never came back for it. The house was very quiet after Lorraine left. Marcus stayed at the table for a long time. I could hear him breathing from the kitchen, heavy, uneven, the kind of breathing that comes when the body is trying to hold together what the spirit has already broken. I didn't go back to him. I didn't comfort him. I stood at the sink with the water running over my hands, and I let the warmth of it remind me that I was still here, still standing, still whole, even if everything around me had shattered. Eventually, he came to the kitchen doorway. He stood there with his hands at his sides, his eyes swollen, his voice stripped down to something I barely recognized. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. I turned off the water, dried my hands on the towel hanging from the oven handle. And I looked at him, really looked at him, the way you look at something you once loved that has become unfamiliar. I want you to leave, I said, tonight. He didn't argue, he didn't beg. I think he knew that begging would have been an insult to both of us. He went to the bedroom, packed a bag, I heard the zipper, the closet door, the drawer sliding open and shut, and 20 minutes later, the front door opened and closed for the second time that evening. I stood alone in my kitchen. The candle on the dining table had gone out on its own, a thin curl of smoke rising from the wick like a last breath. The bank statements were still spread across the tablecloth. Lorraine's necklace was still there, coiled beside the bread basket, catching the overhead light. I sat down at the table, and for the first time in months, the first time since that Tuesday morning when the necklace slid out from between the sheets, I let myself cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly with my hands folded in my lap, tears falling onto the pages that had told me the truth my heart had been trying to deny. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the friend I thought I knew, for the version of my life that had been so carefully, so lovingly constructed, and had turned out to be built on sand. I cried until I was empty, and then I got up, cleared the table, and washed every dish by hand. The weeks that followed were the hardest I've ever lived through, harder than the miscarriages, harder than losing my mother, because at least with those losses I could grieve openly and people understood. But this kind of loss, the betrayal of a husband and a best friend at the same time, carries a shame that doesn't belong to you but sits on your shoulders anyway, like you failed somehow, like you should have seen it, like your love wasn't enough to prevent it. I filed for divorce in March. Marcus didn't contest it. His attorney sent paperwork. My attorney sent paperwork. We divided the house, the accounts, the years reduced to numbers and signatures on a page. He moved into an apartment across town. I kept the house on Collier Road. I kept the rocking chairs on the porch. I kept the clay pot of rosemary, and I watered it every morning the way he used to, because some rituals deserve to survive the people who started them. Lorraine tried to call me once, 3 weeks after that Sunday dinner. Her name lit up my phone screen at 9:47 on a Wednesday night, and I watched it ring until it stopped. She left a voicemail. I listened to it once, her voice thin and shaking, saying she never meant to hurt me, saying it started as nothing and became something she couldn't control, saying she hated herself. I deleted the voicemail, not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation, because forgiveness is a journey, not a switch, and I wasn't far enough down the road yet to hear her voice without feeling the ground shift beneath me. Months passed. Spring turned to summer. I replanted my mother's flower bed along the front walkway, marigolds and zinnias, the bright stubborn kind that bloom even when the soil is tired. I started walking in the evenings, 2 miles through the neighborhood, headphones in, listening to nothing but my own footsteps and the sound of the world continuing without permission. I reconnected with my cousin Diane, who lived in Savannah and had been through her own divorce years ago. She didn't give me advice. She just called every Sunday evening and talked about ordinary things, her garden, her cat, the book she was reading, and let me exist in a space where I didn't have to explain or justify or perform healing. I just had to show up. And showing up, I learned, is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. By autumn I had started sleeping in the center of the bed, not Marcus's side, not mine, the center, like the whole bed was mine now, like the whole house was mine, like the whole life, imperfect, scarred, rebuilt, was mine. And it was. I won't tell you I'm completely healed. That would be a lie, and I've had enough lies to last a lifetime. Some mornings I still reach for the other side of the bed before I remember. Some evenings I still pick up my phone to text Lorraine before the muscle memory catches up with the truth. There are scars that don't fade. There are rooms in your heart that stay locked even after you've thrown away the key. But I will tell you this. I survived. Not because I was strong, I was terrified. Not because I had a plan, I was making it up as I went. I survived because I chose, in the hardest moment of my life, to trust what I knew over what I wished were true. I chose clarity over comfort. I chose myself over the version of love that required me to be blind. And if you're listening to this right now, if something in this story made your chest tighten, made your breath catch, made you think of a necklace or a phone or a silence in your own life that doesn't feel right, I want you to hear me when I say this. Trust yourself. Trust that quiet voice that whispers when the world is trying to shout it down. You are not crazy. You are not paranoid. You are not asking for too much by wanting honesty from the people you love. You deserve a love that doesn't hide in hotel rooms. You deserve a friendship that can look you in the eye. You deserve a table where no one is keeping secrets beneath the placemat. And if the day comes when you have to set the truth down in front of the people who lied to you, do it with your back straight. Do it with your voice steady. Do it with clean hands and a clear heart. Because you are worth more than a necklace between the sheets. You always were. Now I want to ask you something, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Would you have done what I did? Would you have waited, watched, gathered the pieces before you spoke? Or would you have confronted them the moment you found that necklace? There's no wrong answer. There's only your answer. Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story too. And if this story touched you, if it made you feel less alone, or gave you the courage to trust what you already know, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And remember, you are always welcome at this table. But tonight this was Naomi's story, and she wanted you to have it. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one. Yellow heart.